Hi everybody, welcome back to another UniCommunity Co video. This week I'm going to teach you how to sew scrunchies. If you saw my estate sale shopping video, which I will link a card up above to, then you may have seen these adorable vintage napkins that I found, and I think in the video I told you I wanted to turn them into scrunchies. Sewing scrunchies is something I learned during quarantine because I have ginormous hair, and scrunchies are the only things that work. So in this video, I'm going to be teaching you how I learned to sew scrunchies using hair ties. So you can just use any hair ties you might have at home and then any random fabric that you have, and I will show you if it's too short how you can sew them together to make it long enough for scrunchie sewing. Before I get started, the one thing to note is I am not a perfectionist when it comes to sewing. So my fabric is wrinkly, my stitches are wonky, just to name a few issues with my sewing. So if you are looking for a real awesome detailed sewing video, I will link where I learned how to sew these below. Check her channel out. She is a sewing master, definitely much better at explaining it than me. I just wanted to show you that it was possible to sew things even with vintage fabric like napkins or old t-shirts or whatever it is that you have at home. So let's get started on the tutorial. Okay friends, here are the materials you're going to need in order to sew these scrunchies. First of all, you're going to need a cutting board, cutting mat, a cutting guide, ideally with numbers on it so that you can measure your fabric, scrunchies, and I personally prefer these seamless scrunchies because they have a very nice stretch on them and they don't hurt your wrist. Something to cut with, pins if you like to sew with pins, something to measure with if your guides don't have measurements, scissors, fabric, which as I mentioned, I'm using these vintage napkins, and of course a sewing machine and some thread. Starting with your fabric, and in this case I'm using these vintage napkins. These are not long enough for scrunchies. So the idea to make a scrunchie is you're going to cut your fabric in strips and then sew those strips around your hair tie. But these napkins are just not long enough. So what I'm going to need to do is sew two of them together so that when I unfold at the seam, it will be long enough. First thing you're going to want to do is line your fabric up and make sure your print sides are facing each other. Then line up one side for you to take to your sewing machine and just sew a stitch all the way across. Now I can actually unfold it, and idealistically you'd iron this so you had a nice flat seam there. But now you can see we've got a much bigger piece of fabric, so then we're able to cut our strips for our scrunchies. The longer your strips of fabric are, the scrunchier your scrunchie will be. My strips are about 30 some inches. So they are 38 inches long, and this is how scrunched the fabric comes out. So you could probably get away with, honestly, about 22 inches is the recommendation from the video I'm going to link below of where you can actually learn how to sew. Now, if you are using a bigger sized hair tie, then again, you have to account for that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and fold this back up because my cutting mat is not long enough to cut them like that, and frankly, that would be silly if I did. So I'm just gonna fold this back up and then cut with it in half like this. And again, ideally your fabric would be ironed. if you're a perfectionist. But all we're making here today are scrunchies. It's not like I'm making clothes. So now that I have my edge lined up here, it's time to decide how wide I'd like to cut my strips. And in order to explain what this determines, I tried different sizes for y'all. So I made 4 different size scrunchies. So the recommendation is to do about 3.5 inches wide on your fabric strips. So just to show you, I did 3 inches, which is where you get very little scrunchie. So that kind of determines the width of our scrunchie. It also determines how hard it is to turn your fabric right side out, because we sew it inside out. So that's 3 inches wide. This is 3.5 inches wide. This is 4 inches wide, and this is 4.5 inches wide. So depending on what you like on your wrist or in your hair is going to determine how wide you want your strips. And it's all customizable. Like if you like a really big fluffy scrunchie, more of like a decorative kind of deal than useful, I suppose, then the wider you want your strips to be cut. Now personally, I like all of them. It just depends on what kind of mood you're in, you know? And so it's totally up to you of how you like your scrunchies to look. Again, this here is 3 inches wide. This is 3.5, 4, and 4.5 just for kicks. So I think just to show you, I'll do a 3.5 inch one. And you want to cut along the edge that you haven't sewn so that you're able to unfold it and it be one long strip. So this is where my seam is that I've sewn, so I'm going to cut along this direction. Then we're going to get our cutting guide or our ruler, whatever you like to call it, and we're going to measure out 3.5 inches. And you can also do that on your cutting mat if you have one that has measurements on it. So I'm just going to take my rotary cutter. If you use scissors, that's cool too. And just hold my guide down and cut across. Now we've got this 3.5 inch wide strip. So now with your strip of fabric cut, you're going to unfold it. You're going to get your hair tie, and you're going to want to slip one corner through your hair tie like so, and then put the print sides together. So you're going to sew along this edge to create a long tube of inside out fabric, which will wrap around your hair tie, and then you can sew the edges together at the end. So let's take it to the sewing machine and get it sewn. Now that we've got our scrunchie sewn around the edge, so this is the edge around which I sewed, what you get left with are these 2 undone ends. And you're going to first turn the scrunchie right side out. And now there are real sewing methods to this, okay? There are, if you have a safety pin, you can like connect it to one side and get it all right side out. But your girl just is not a sewer and can never figure out the true technique, like of, you know, putting it around a piece, like a pencil or something, and then getting it right side out. So I just do a weird little thing of like shoving and tugging and weird stuff to try to get this right side out. So bear with me. Wow, I get this right side out for you. So about 5 minutes later, I finally have the fabric turned all right side out. And what we have is this gap here. between our tube. So all we need to do is sew this together to finish our scrunchie. So in order to do so, you're going to want to just fold in one edge of that. Just tuck it in and kind of fold it back on itself so that you get some clean edges. Fold part of the tube in. See how now it's not this raw edge? It's a nice folded clean line. And then ensure that your seam is on the outside all the way around and that it didn't get twisted. And then you can go ahead and tuck in this raw edge that we didn't fold into our folded side. And then line up the seams around the edge. And all you're going to need to do is just, well, tuck it back in. And then all you're going to need to do is just sew across where you tucked it in. And there you have it, friends. A completed scrunchie made with some vintage napkins. So you do get a very rigid seam right across here, which if you don't like, I was thinking you could always just take some strip of fabric and tie a little bow around there, and then your scrunchie's even cuter than it once was. And there you have it, friends. Scrunchies. Is this overboard? Is this overkill? You get it. You sewed a scrunchie. Congratulations. I hope this tutorial worked out for you. Again, do check out the video I'm linking below if you need more detail, or you can always reach out to me in the comments. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more from UniCommunity Co., please do subscribe to support the channel, and I can do more crafty videos, DIY stuff, better than sewing scrunchies. All right, thanks to each and every one of you for watching. I love you all. Have a fantastic rest of your time of your day. Okay, bye.